So if you didn't meet me last week, I'm James. I'm a PhD student in astrophysics at the RSAA at ANU. And today we're not going to talk about astrophysics, but we're going to keep talking about viruses because, of course, viruses right now are extremely important to understand. And the more information we know about these things, the better we can react to these things. So I'm going to share my screen now. So today I'm going to be talking about modeling transmittable diseases. So, just trying to get a very simple model together with a computer that allows us to understand how these diseases spread through population. And also I'll be talking about flattening the curve. Now, this is probably something you've heard about. I mean, I think the Prime Minister has said it many times about flattening the curve. Maybe your friends, maybe at school are talking about flattening the curve. So I just want to really define what this flattening the curve is. And this is where we'll start today. So our goal here is to create a computer model that helps us understand what influences the curve. And what is the curve? Well, the curve is just the number of cases. So you can see on the y-axis of this plot, we have the number of cases. So that's the number of people with the virus. And on the x-axis, we see the time since the first case. So as the curve grows, as it goes up, it means more people have the virus since the first case. And why do we want to flatten this curve? So that is the curve. Why do we want to flatten this curve? Well, because if more and more people have the virus and some amount of those people are going to the hospital, going to the doctor, going to seek medical help, those people are just not going to be able to see the doctor when there's no longer any time the doctor can fit them in. So we have to really think about this, how we can get all the people who have the virus to the doctor without overflowing the healthcare system. And Ryan just talked about a whole bunch of different strategies like washing your hands, not touching your face, staying at home, etc. when you're sick. But we can explore this in more detail, not by actually going outside and testing people and working out who has the virus and how our healthcare system is going to interact with this, but by running very simple models with computers. And modeling things with computers, I talked about this last week, is very, very important in astrophysics. It lets us understand, build an intuition for all these different really complex astrophysical phenomena. But much more than that, it's much cheaper than going out, and sampling all these humans and doing all these weird experiments. We just can't do it with real humans, so we do them on computers. So let's first construct our very toy population. So this is where we're going to start. So in our population, there's just two types of people. There's sick individuals and there's healthy individuals. Now we have to define a couple of rules for how these individuals interact with each other. So when a sick individual interacts with a healthy individual, the healthy person also becomes sick. So, there's some kind of interaction between the healthy and the sick person, and the sick person spreads the virus or spreads the disease to the healthy individual. Now, when a sick individual and a sick individual interact, they, of course, just, they stay the same. Both of them are still sick. So let's have a look at this simulation. Very, very simple. We have it in one dimensions here. So our whole world lives on a straight line. And now we have these sick individuals starting on one side, and we can see how the sickness kind of propagates its way through the population. But this is actually way too simple, right? We need some more information here. For one, it's in 1D, so that's very, very simple. But also, when people get sick, after some amount of time, they recover. So we should also include not only sick and healthy individuals in our population, so not only sick and healthy, but also recovered individuals. And the rules of the simulation are going to be the same. A sick individual but we'll add some more, sorry. A sick individual will recover after some amount of time. And in these simulations, they will recover and be immune to the disease. Also, a sick individual interacting with a recovered individual will just get our recovered individual back because of this immunity. So we can see how this kind of works in 1D again. So our sick individual just turned into a recovered individual. Yes. So everyone's recovered in the population now. But again, this kind of, we're not getting all the important information we need. We need a larger universe, you could say. So this is only in one dimension. See, they're only interacting along this line. But let's see what happens in 2 dimensions. So, okay, we're going to just give these 2 people the disease, and then you're going to start seeing these guys wandering all over the place. So everyone is just wandering wild. There's no isolation. There's no any of that. Everyone is just free wandering all over the world. Okay, let's see it. So you see, every time they interact with a healthy person, they create a other sick person. And you can see the virus is just spreading really quickly all through the world. We see lots of recovery as well, so that's good. But at some point, there reaches a saturation where there's some maximum amount. Almost the entire population is sick at once. And that isn't very good for things like the hospital and the doctors. So at this point here, so this is our curve. So this is the curve that we want to flatten, remember? So all of this orange is all the sick individuals, and this height here is the total population. So essentially at one point in time, somewhere around the middle of my simulation, they actually, almost all the population was sick. And this would be really bad. It would mean that every single person in the population would have to go and see the doctor, go and seek medical help, and it would put a huge amounts of strain on the medical system. Indeed, maybe even the doctors are sick, so it'd be very hard. And then we see it decay again as more and more individuals recover from the illness. So this is what a very steep curve looks like. Okay, so now we have this kind of this toy model, this simulation of the world. Now let's change it up a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to isolate. So we're going to only have the virus in this isolated population away from the entire world. So maybe, you know, you can think about that as just like the virus just exists in a little country all by itself. It's not spreading around the entire world yet. Okay. So you see the virus is doing what it's doing before, interacting with people, spreading the sickness, and our isolation is slowly relaxing as well. So we're opening up some information between the entire population and this isolated population. You can see our curve is very different from before already. So very interesting, our curve actually is much, much longer. So there's a larger amount of time that goes by where there's fewer sick individuals. And then after we open up the isolation, we see this large peak in the curve, again, at a much larger date. And then the whole population is recovered after lots and lots of time. So this looks like it's quite useful for spreading the curve out. So we certainly see a lot of spread of the curve, but we still get this peak, which may be troublesome for our medical system still. So let's see if we can do even better. So now I'm going to talk about social distancing. So we can try to encode what social distancing might be in our simulation. And to do that, we really are just going to stop people from moving around. So before, in our previous simulations, everyone was moving around, interacting with everyone else, but that's not the case anymore. 3 out of the 4 people are no longer traveling around in this simulation. So you're going to see 3 out of the 4 people just staying completely still while just a few people travel around. Okay, so you see, already you can see that the disease, that there's these orange sick people, is just spreading much, much more slowly. And we're getting some recovery as well. So after a long amount of time, you can see that this curve really is very flat now. So the amount of people getting the sickness is really, really tapered off. There's no really strong peak that we saw in the first simulation. So this is clearly a way that we can, in this very simple model, flatten the curve. We can lessen the impact that we have on the hospitals and the doctors who need to see all of these sick patients. Now let's go to the even more extreme. Let's say 7 out of 8 people do not travel around. So even fewer amount of the population is now traveling around. Even more amount of the population are just staying at home, hanging out, playing video games. So very, very few people contracting the virus. Of course, you know, you go and visit your neighbor and your neighbor seems to get it. My other neighbor got it. But the curve is so flat. I mean, you know, these people can just go and see the doctor. The doctor isn't overwhelmed by all the patients, and the curve is nice and flat. So really, this is So this is the kind of simulations that we do as scientists, as researchers, to understand how things models, and we keep adding a little bit of complexity to them until we think we can get, you know, a rough estimate of the behavior. And then this gives us intuition about what strategies may work and what strategies won't work. So this is how we use simulations to test our ideas in science. Of course, these are very simple simulations, extremely simple. And the simulations that the real researchers do on this kinds of virus and disease dynamics are much, much more complicated. We can't talk about them today. They're too complicated. But we see very nice, or at least we capture some of the important behavior with these very simple simulations, which is the point of making these. Just to summarize now, I mean, we saw these two kind of strategies being implemented in our very simple world. It's a social distancing strategy where people were really staying at home and isolating themselves, and there was only a couple of people dynamically moving around our world. And then this quarantine effect is also, which also spread the curve out because the population, the sick population was isolated from the global population. So what this looks like in our worst case scenario was the free-for-all. Everyone was just running around spreading the disease, and you know, this curve got really, really sharp, really peaked really hard, and maybe the hospital capacity is about half of this curve. So all these people will really struggle to find hospital beds. They'll struggle to see a doctor, and this could be quite bad. But when we practice these good strategies that we've discovered, this social distancing, these quarantine strategies, we see that we can flatten out the curve, and perhaps we'll never get to the hospital capacity where all these people who do get the illness can actually go and see doctors and can be treated appropriately. So this is really all I wanted to talk about today. I hope I got you to understand a little bit about why we think that these social distancing and quarantine strategies actually work, even if right now I'm presenting to you only these very simple simulations.